In less than 2 months, U.S. Assistant Secretary of State Victoria Nuland is making her second visit to Ukraine, where anti-government protesters have received the full support and backing of Washington. Now, U.S. officials say this trip is aimed towards aiding the country in forming a new government and helping Ukrainians fulfill their democratic aspirations. You see, in recent years, the U.S. has cemented its reputation in siding with anti-government opposition movements taking place in sovereign countries such as Tunisia, Egypt, Libya, and Syria. But in the case of Ukraine, U.S. officials are actually flying over the Atlantic to visit and possibly strategize with pro-European Union protesters, a power play that critics say Washington would condemn if the roles were reversed. In all fairness, critics say the U.S. does sometimes show restraint when it comes to foreign conflicts. For example, in Bahrain, as brutal and deadly crackdowns against peaceful, unarmed protesters have taken place, the U.S. has minded its own business. America has also respected its right to remain silent as Saudi Arabia recently enacted a new law allowing the kingdom to prosecute and jail anyone who exposes corruption or demands reform. Reporting from New York, Marina Portnaya, RT.
Hi there, I'm Darren Howard.
And I'm Robert Nisbet.
You're tuned into Video Radio at Radio Free Canada. It is Sunday, March the 2nd.
Are we in the Ides of March yet?
I don't know, man. It is snowing and it's cold out today. But in Ukraine, it's even colder. You have to remember that the entire protest situation you see in Ukraine is right in the middle of their winter, which is comparable to a Canadian winter.
Yeah, but it was kind of interesting in that last clip. It showed us that how the U.S. is actually giving lip service to protesters in the Ukraine while ignoring real protests going on in, Bahrain and Saudi Arabia.
It just so happens that, those governments are pro-U.S. and this one is questionable.
Yeah.
So check it out, the interventionism that's going on.
Well, they pumped $5 billion into that protest in the Ukraine.
Yes.
I don't know if that was all taxpayers' money. It may have been privately funded.
Yeah. So make sure you check out our facts. We're going to give you a few updates here as things go on, but what do we got?
Well, apparently the ousted leader of the Ukraine, Mr. Yanakovic, has had an arrest warrant sworn out against him for mass murder.
Check it out.
New images of last week's crackdown in Kiev. Shots aimed at unarmed civilians, dozens of lives lost, and the killings led to the downfall of a president. Ukraine's acting interior minister, in a posting on Facebook, says Yanakovic and others should face justice for ordering the killing of civilians. And one far-right opposition leader is claiming Russia may be about to take military action against Ukraine as part of an attempt to rescue the former president. The sweeping changes that followed the violence have left a security void. Self-defense units who had defended Independence Square are attempting to fill that void with work that includes guarding public buildings. It may look normal, like the centre of any major European city, but this is the capital of a country that has no functioning police force. These people refuse to remove their barriers, and they insist that the only way forward is the use of a network of self-defense groups. While the pace of political change in Ukraine is fast, the start of its new system of policing will be much slower. And the people of Independence Square are in no mood to hand over full control. Andrew Simmons, Al Jazeera, Kiev.
While things are heating up in the Ukraine, apparently our federal government has decided to throw their full weight of approval behind the Ukrainian people, and John Baird is, at present, winging his way into Eastern Europe to make a fool of us.
And of course, none of the opposition was invited along for the all-expense-paid vacation and junket for all of those guys. So of course, there isn't a fair and balanced representation of the country. We have John Baird.
Yeah, and while things are heating up in Ukraine, and we'll be back in our next segment to update you on what's going on vis-a-vis the geopolitical situation there.
Make sure you get informed, though, about the way things are changing. The way the major media is misrepresenting or glorifying the situation instead of getting down to what's really happening in the Ukraine.
Now we turn our attention to South America, where people are complaining and protesting as well. In Brazil, the upcoming World Cup has been a bone of contention amongst the common people.
He said that so well. Bone of contention. Holy smokes. There, just like the Olympic situation down in Vancouver, people realize that our tax dollars going for one sporting event while causing homelessness and general poverty to occur probably isn't a good idea.
But of course, the Brazilian government has decided to take that draconian step of criminalizing protest and reclassifying it as terrorism.
So how do you think this will work out?
About as well as it did everywhere else they've tried that. Check it out.
The Brazilian Senate is debating a new legislation that will characterize as terrorism the act of creating or inducing or panic among the population during public protests. Some experts say the move could put Brazil's democracy at risk.
Brazil does not have laws that clarify acts of terrorism, and at this time of high social unrest, there is pressure in favor of this new action, which could pave the way for penalizing individuals or organizations participating in public protests during the upcoming Soccer World Cup. However, similar laws around the world have proven that a law like this proposed act could harm our democracy.
Those who violate the anti-terrorism law by committing acts of vandalism against public property and educational institutions or disrupting public transport could face imprisonment of 3 to 30 years. However, experts say the definition of terror depends on the interpretation of the law. Reporting from São Paulo, Brazil, Ronnie Carvello, Press TV.
Now, you're seeing all of these protests happen around the world, and I mean, we have, what, 5, 6 countries right now?
At the very least.
You know, that are currently overthrowing their governments. It's happening in a domino effect everywhere. It's due to austerity, it's due to poverty. Very little of it has to do with the excuses that they come up with on Lamestream Media.
And one nation that's completely fallen off the radar as far as protest is concerned has been Turkey.
Yeah. Okay, major country, very pivotal place in the region, and not being covered.
No, but of course, Mr. Erdogan, who is being accused of corruption in his government, has a few things to say, and he's decided he's going to censor the internet, and he has a few other measures that are not really in the furtherance of freedom. But check out this clip from the Young Turks.
So in Turkey, there's these mass protests right now. At least 2,000 people showed up for the most recent one. But in the midst of this, we had a fascinating development, which is in the middle of a protest, not only were they firing tear gas, which is fairly normal, not just in Turkish protests, but in others as well. But as you see there in that picture, they also started firing water cannons. But what in the world is in the water cannon? Why is it red? An ingenious tactic, they put red pepper spray in the water cannon. And so that fire water you're looking at right there is blasting a reporter on the scene. What kind of a situation are we in? Where we got reporters with gas masks, we got pepper spray water cannons, and this is your own people, man. Look at that, right? If you weren't already oppressing your own people, perhaps we wouldn't have gotten to this place, right? And look, he claims, of course, the Prime Minister does, Erdogan, oh, no, me clamping down on the internet. No. I'm actually trying to make Turkey freer. So now they are looking to get rid of all dissent. They've got these massive corruption charges against them, huge protests in the street for different reasons, and their response is more censorship and more pepper spray water cannons. Not really the response of someone who's in the right.
So the interesting thing that we go through all the time is who do you believe, and what perspective is the right one to take?
Well, it's kind of funny, when it's an ally of NATO, they don't get a lot of coverage in the U.S. mainstream media.
But when it's an ally of anyone else, holy smokes, vilification. Nobody ever hears the word about what these places are like before we bomb them into, oblivion.
No.
All right.
And speaking of places we bombed into oblivion, I remember a little country called Bosnia
Herzegovina.
Hey, you caught that. Used to be called Yugoslavia.
Yeah.
Didn't we have a little? Didn't NATO have a little active role in that, in installing the present government, which is being protested for corruption? You guessed it. People are upset in Bosnia as well.
Check it out.
Story, another day of demonstrations in a dozen Bosnian cities with protesters urging the government to resign. Over the past 6 days, demonstrators have gathered in Sarajevo and other major cities. They're protesting against, quote, corrupt politicians, government austerity measures and unemployment. They say overpaid politicians are obsessed with inter-ethnic bickering. In response to the unrest, local governments in Sarajevo and 4 other cities have resigned. 1 in 5 Bosnians lives below the poverty line, and corruption is said to be widespread, with high taxes eating away people's income. Let's talk to our correspondent in Sarajevo, Ivana Sedi. And how much of the demonstrations affected local businesses and the economy?
The damage that has been done during the past couple of days will cost millions of euros, and the truth is that the citizens will have to pay all that through taxes, through incomes and everything.
All right, we'll leave it there for the time being. Press TV's Ivana Setic, our correspondent, reporting from Sarajevo.
So once again, protests going ignored. Protests are so effective. They're overthrowing governments right now, kicking out oil pipelines and Monsanto on a world basis.
That's right.
And if you're a corrupt government, you should be quaking in your boots because 4G is going everywhere.
It sure is.
Talking about using their own tools against them. And when you're talking about protests, information is winning the war almost every time, which is why we're urging you to start your own radio station so you don't have to put up with us.
Of course, there is one country where, it takes a lot to get the people upset.
However...
That would be Nippon.
And those people over there, well, 45,000 of them showed up at the mayor's house when he decided he was going to turn a nuclear power plant back on. And since then, they've been hitting the streets.
And of course, they're not very happy with the situation of the U.S. bases and the fact that U.S. servicemen are going unpunished for all kinds of crimes.
Check this out.
The U.S. ambassador to Japan, Caroline Kennedy, visited the southern island of Okinawa on Wednesday amidst local protests against the U.S. military presence. Kennedy met with Okinawa's governor, Hirokazu Nakayama, who has agreed to relocate a U.S. base from a densely populated urban area to a more remote location. But a decades-long movement of Okinawa residents has opposed the base altogether and pushed for ousting U.S. forces off the island, citing environmental concerns and sexual assaults by U.S. soldiers. Since 1972, U.S. service members have been accused of over 5,800 crimes, including 26 murders and 128 rapes. At their meeting, Kennedy pledged cooperation while the governor urged the U.S. to address local concerns. Ambassador Kennedy faced a protest from a crowd of several hundred people. Critics have denounced her visit as an empty gesture, as she won't be meeting with the recently re-elected mayor of Nago, the town where the base is to be moved. The mayor, Susumu Inamine, campaigned on a pledge to block construction of the replacement U.S. military site.
So I'll say it all the time. When the Japanese stand up and start protesting,
you better pay attention.
I mean, anybody who looks at the 100 monkey principles or things like that, the world's waking up right now. Protesting is working, and information is going around like it's never gone before in this generation, in the Industrial Revolution era.
Well, they kind of gave us the tools for instant communication worldwide.
And that was a mistake because we're actually talking. So, in celebration of that, we're going to continue broadcasting the truth while Lamestream Media continues idolizing naked pop singers licking hammers.
We promise we'll stop telling the truth as soon as you start.
I'm Darren Howard.
And I'm Robert Nisbet.
You've been tuned into Video Radio. More to come. Stay tuned after these lack of messages.